outside, outside China, because we think it's important to seed the organization. You can't just have 150 college hires and let them run wild. So we are actively looking and growing, and hopefully we'll end up with a reasonable mix. And we think the returnees are going to be a very important part of our organization, but also I think any other company, whether it's a startup Chinese company or a multinational, they would do well to have a good mixture of returnees and local employees. And in that way, I think the good American or Western practices can be brought in, combined with the great Chinese talent to really maximize the potential of the organization. One thing I would add is that the gap is actually closing quick. Just to give you an idea, typically in a software company, you would expect 3 or 4 years of seasoning before a campus hire becomes a lead. 1 year into China, we already have 5 leads coming out of our campus hires last year. We're actually doing a project with the New York Google office, and I was here 2 days ago talking to them, and they were our engineers in the New York office were very, very pleased working with our lead in China, who was just graduated 1 year ago. And so the people are really stepping up and growing rapidly. So for those people who think, the Chinese talent is more for copying, less for innovation, not ready for leadership, well, I can quite confidently tell you that's not the case, and that gap is closing. And associated with that closing is there are a lot of people in the US who ask me, hey, I want to move back to China. When's a good time? I think in light of the closing gap, the answer is better move soon before there's no longer a gap. That's been the advice I gave. I gave a talk at Stanford last week. This question always comes up, and I think there really is an advantage at the moment for people who have an American education and multinational working experience, who are bicultural, to go back to China. And that, I think, is a very leverageable skill in the short window in which the gap exists, and that gap, I think, will close. Okay, lastly, I want to just talk about a few specific practices at Google that we have to attract, train, and retain talent. In terms of attraction, the talent pool is so huge. We probably could get 100,000 applications just from campuses a year, and there's no way we can physically process all that because we take it very seriously. So like most companies, we go through a written test, which is probably an unlikely phenomenon in the US, but that's necessary to take the 100,000 down to more like 1,000, and then we would interview all of them to select our 100 or 150 people. We take hiring very, very seriously. We also heard about one of the issues Jia-Bin brought up was, John brought up, was the English skills. We want great engineers. We want great researchers. We don't care if their English is not good. So when I went to China, we established a new policy. All interviews are to be conducted in Chinese. For engineers, we don't care if they don't like speaking English or don't speak any English. They have to show some willingness to learn. I strongly believe any smart person should be able to learn English once they get into the company. So we want that not to be an entry barrier, at least for the engineering jobs. We also are very, very attentive to all the people we hire. I personally call each person that we hire or meet with them. During the first year, we got 149 acceptances and 1 rejection. So I went to that person and said, why are you not coming? And he said, well, my mom thinks, and my girlfriend thinks I should go to a more established company. Said, Google is just too new and too small for my stability. And I said, my answer was, may I meet your mom and your girlfriend? Which I did, and we eventually changed their minds, and we ended up with 100% acceptance. And I think that's the degree of caring that you need to really get to attract the best and the brightest. In terms of training, we also do a lot of very interesting things. Certainly, we have training courses and all of that. That's fairly standard for all multinationals. I'll talk about a few strange things that we do to really show that in the long term we care greatly about the talent. For the campus hires who come in, they get to spend half of their first year in the United States. And that's a tremendous opportunity for them to be immersed in the culture, which is really important. And also, in addition to the standard training, a lot of Chinese new hires don't completely fit in the Google culture day one. You know, we expect people to be proactive, to challenge people, to challenge me. So I go out of my way to encourage that and to thank people when they do it. And also, we want people to build up confidence, right? In the US, all of our engineers spend 20% of the time doing whatever project they want. But people in China may be a little more cautious, afraid that what they want might be something the company doesn't want. So I would organize these special brainstorming sessions where multiple people would discuss a topic and agree upon a topic so that they would have the confidence to tackle the project, as opposed to feeling like, well, they should just do whatever the company asked them to do. So I think training is not just about courses, but it's about being very meticulous about these small things. And lastly, to retain talent, most of you might have heard that Google was elected as the #1 company in the US. We want to be that in China also, but we also want to localize that. So there's a gym in the US, we also have a gym. There's massage services, we also have that. But we also offer the Chinese localized foot massage. There's great chef and food in the US. We also hired a great chef last week. And he's actually not just someone who cooks, but he has cooked meals for Jiang Zemin and for Lian Zhan. So he's a state banquet type of chef. And of course, we also offer Dance Revolution, karaoke, yoga lessons, and all that to make, not so much to spoil the employees. What's more important is they know how much the company cares. And then lastly, we realize a lot of people that we hire actually want to get a degree in the US. Our biggest competitor turns out to be Stanford. And we're giving them a chance to have their cake and eat it too. For any bachelor graduates who joins Google, we will pay for their Stanford master's degree while employed at Google. So that's the last unique thing that we offer. Thank you, that's all.
And I just want to add one comment to this that was sort of touched on by Bill Rhodes earlier and alluded to by both Jia-Bin and Kai-Fu this morning. This idea of multinational companies, and Bill gave the example of Citigroup putting their training center in Shanghai, which he said was available not just to Citigroup people, but also to clients and to professionals in the financial system. And Kai-Fu talked about Microsoft developing, as you heard, and the same with Cisco, and the same with Google. And in effect, what these multinationals are capable of doing, and I believe needs to be done more broadly and more self-consciously and with more ambition. They're capable of producing, taking raw talent and in a relatively short period of time, turning it into global talent. That global talent then either benefits the corporation who's done the transition, or alternatively, the global talent goes off into the system and typically benefits them anyway. I've given this exact advice to any number of service firms. This works perfectly for consulting firms, for financial service firms, for engineering, accounting, and so on. It's not being done anywhere near the scale I think it needs to be done. And if I were Wen Jiabao, every time a Western CEO came in and said to me, Mr. Premier, I'd like to do X, Y, and Z, I'd say, that's wonderful. I'm going to give you the license to do X, Y, and Z, and what you're going to do for me is you're going to start a training center in Liaoning province, or you're going to start a training center in some other province. And I think that needs to be done, and it needs to be done in an ambitious way to close this gap faster. Michael, for you, the question is this: the gap that's closing that Kai-Fu talked about, in your opinion or in your experience, do you see the same closing of the gap in other industries?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think what we're seeing with our member companies is because they're growing so fast and they're expanding, the demand is growing faster than the supply. So we see that gap growing. It's not getting better.
By the way, the gap I was referring to was the gap between the returnees and the local employees. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I say that gap still exists. Previously, when I was working in another company, we hired returnees. We also hired a lot of local people. For a lot of the management positions, it took us probably 4 or 5 years to get a manager up to the level where we could bring in a returnee. Problem with returnees is they often come with much higher expectations and have to deal with acceptance by our other employees.
Okay, question, Jia-Bin, and maybe for anyone else who wants to take it, is this. This is an assertion, which I'm not going to challenge for the moment. There is very little company loyalty